Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast. This is part of the Midwest University Speaker Series webcasts. We had several in the past. Recordings are available on those, and there'll be more in the future as well. Today's class is on new CAD management workflows for Civil 3D. My name is Brian Lewandowski. I'll be your presenter today. I am the Civil Product Manager at CTC Software, and we work very closely with Midwest University host ATG. They're a close partner of ours. So with that, why don't we get started? And to begin, I want to talk a bit about CAD management responsibilities, set the stage a little bit, give some context to what we're talking about today. One of the biggest things is what I call content creation. And content creation involves all your templates, your standards, your libraries, all of those files, dozens of different file types that you have to put together to provide to teams so they can work effectively in Civil 3D. The second one is content deployment. So it's not just software installation, but the customization and the configuration of Civil 3D so that it works the way it's supposed to your standards with your processes as efficiently as possible. We don't want users to have to figure that out each and every time they install Civil 3D or create new drawings or what have you. So content deployment is another big piece of what you guys do. And then of course, training and support. Many of you are the kind of go-to people, the experts perhaps at your organizations. People come to you in the form of support or just outright training that you're providing to them. So my focus today, first and foremost, is going to be on content creation. And then I do want to give some resources and some tips on content deployment. And so that will be the focus, the items 1 and 2 here today. So let's start with content creation and what are some of the challenges around that. I think we could all probably agree it just takes too much time to do this work. There's entirely too many details to keep track of. There's so much that goes into your standards and the content and setting that up. You might set something up and come back to it 6 months later. You can't possibly remember everything there. A lot of the interfaces that we have to work in within AutoCAD and Civil 3D to manage, maintain, or create new content standards are slow, they're glitchy. We run into all sorts of unpurgeable items. What's the result of that? Many times we have extra layers and things that we don't want in our templates, but we don't have the time to kind of figure out where they're being used and so forth. And inexperience. This is the big piece, in fact. A lot of us get into CAD manager roles because we were, just the person who knew the most about Civil 3D, or maybe it was the most interesting to us. Either way, we're often jumping into it, or even have been in it for a while. And it's hard to keep a handle on everything, right? We're coming to it not perhaps knowing how to build a template from scratch. Maybe we don't know how to configure sub-assemblies, a variety of different things. Maybe we did in the past, but we've forgotten because it's been some time now. So inexperience certainly plays a role. And all of this feeds into mediocre content that we end up with. And that begets frustrated users and slower production. So it's not just about those who are doing this content management work in their time and their satisfaction. It's also about all those other users you're supporting, right? So effective templates, effective content makes a big difference across your entire teams. And there's no easy answers on this stuff, certainly. So what does content creation involve? Tons of different things. I'll mention kind of some primary categories, the way I think about it here. Line types, plot styles, a lot of that base AutoCAD stuff. Layers are a huge part of how we work in our drawings. AutoCAD annotation styles like text styles, dim styles. Of course, all of our Civil 3D object and label styles. That's a huge part of it. We often have thousands of those in a given template. We have object layer settings. This is some of the behind the scenes stuff that dictate what layers objects land on. On the survey side, we have a whole set of description keys and a figure database to manage. And then there's all the on-demand content for users like block libraries, custom subassemblies, and things like that. And then there's all these default settings on how this stuff works, okay? Now the title of this class was New Management, CAD Management Workflows in Civil 3D. And so I want to show you a variety of solutions that help you take the vast majority of this stuff and do it more effectively, faster, in many cases, in a much better way. And so I'm going to introduce, some of you might be familiar with it, something called the CIM Manager Suite, and then also a product called the Corridor Productivity Pack. And just with some of the color coding you can see here, these tools help across the vast majority of everything you guys have to manage in your content. So just a brief introduction, what is the CIM Manager Suite? And then I want to jump into Civil 3D and talk you through and walk you through a variety of common tasks that you guys are having to deal with, give you some tips and tricks along the way, and then also show you where the CIM Manager Suite fits in to take what are normally really tedious tasks and make them a lot faster. So CIM Manager Suite is a fleet of CAD manager tools for Civil 3D and AutoCAD. It does a variety of things. A number of the things include syncing things like layers and description key sets and figure database, and a lot of these kind of major table interfaces, we can sync them with Excel. In other words, we can export or import to and from Excel, managing a huge chunk of all of our standards and settings in our templates right through a very comfortable and flexible interface in Excel. I talked about those unpurgeable items, layer and style referencing, tracking. We can do this in CIM Manager Suite. And we have a nice visual line type editor as well. And these are all part of this CIM Manager Suite set of tools. The Corridor Productivity Pack, this is a set of free custom subassemblies. So I'm going to talk certainly about some tools that come with some licensing, but I also want to give you guys a lot of free resources and tips and tricks along the way too. So the Corridor Productivity Pack is a set of free custom subassemblies. They're built to very realistic geometrics. They have customizable codes for detailed cross sections and QTO. They have full targeting capability. They're completely editable in Subassembly Composer. They come with detailed help files. And you can really just go right to CTC Software and download them for free. It's a set of PKT files. You can get your hands on them. Tweak them if you want. They are for you to use. So that's part of improving some of that content more effectively. That is a free resource to you guys. A little shout out to an old coworker of mine. I think he's on the call, Scott Myzak. Scott Myzak was a big part of the production and the creation of the Corridor Productivity Pack as well as the CIM Manager Suite. So with that, I'm going to jump into Civil 3D. We're going to talk a little bit about this. Here's that CIM Manager Suite we talked about, okay? I'm going to frame this around common workflows you might have to deal with, not just showcasing the tools. I want to show you where they fit in, but I want to address, like I said, common challenges, the ones that we talked about just a moment ago. And we're going to start with line types. Here's a standard line type file. Many of you have seen this. Many of you cringe when you see this. I hate dealing with line type files, okay? They're dependable. They're easy to work with if you know how to code all this stuff, okay? So one of the things I want to show you is how to use Linetype Manager, one of the tools in the CIM Manager Suite, to much more easily create line types, edit line types. And you can do it all without having to come into Notepad and know this kind of goofy programming language, so to speak, to create line types. You try it out, you save it here, you go back to Civil 3D and you import it. Is that the way I want it to look? Many times it's not, so you come back and it's this back and forth thing that's quite time consuming. And oftentimes we leave less than desirable line types in our templates and in our lin file just because we don't have the time to do this stuff. So this first tool, in fact, I'm going to show you, this one is totally free as well. We have a free tool in the CIM Manager Suite. It is the Linetype Manager. So the way the Linetype Manager works is it simply launches from the ribbon in this way, and you can open up a lin file right here, just like you'd browse to a DWG. The difference is that instead of just giving you this list here, which it does, it actually gives you a preview of every little line type as you click on it, okay? Now this is invaluable because that syntax in a lin file back here in Notepad, it's really hard to understand what that will look like, right? And so not only just viewing them in a list here, but when it comes time to editing these things or creating new ones, time savings are huge. Let's take this gas line type. If I click on the edit button here, so open this in a component-based interface, okay? Now, by the way, everything we're doing here, we're just working with standard AutoCAD content. We're not making different types of line types. These all write to lin files, they're standard line types. We're just giving you a different way, much more effective and easy way to create and edit these line types. So here's this preview down here. I can change the scale to get a different view on it. It could be any number of things we want to do here. We want to change the font type. Maybe we want to change the spacing around the word gas here. As I tab through this, you can see as I change values, see the spacing around gas here? I change this up here for this space component, and it updates on the fly. This is the point of Linetype Manager. Create and edit line types with a visual dynamic preview as you're doing so. Okay, I save this up here. It saves it back to the lin file. We're on our way. Let's go ahead and create a new line type just so you can kind of see what this workflow looks like. Now you can type out those, you know, a preview with dashes and things like that if you want, but you really don't need to do that anymore when you have Linetype Manager. So here's how it works. We have a series of components, and when I create a new one, by default, there's just a few line and space components. So let's say we want to delete a few of these. We've got my line, I've got a space, and now I want to add in a shape component, but I could add a text, could add either one there. We're going to add a shape. And when I do this, you see it shows up in the preview down here. Now up here, what this is doing is it's reading from my option support files, and it's parsing out the shape files that it found in there. I can now choose shapes within those shape files to build out my line type. So normally you're spelling this out in kind of a string of characters in a line type file. Here it's very, let's call it foolproof, because it's just prompting you for the fields. You enter them, and as you kind of trial and error enter different values, it gives you the preview, so you can very quickly understand what it is you're creating. We want some rotation on that. Okay. Now as I create this, I can jump back up to this space and say, well, maybe that should be a 0.2. Okay. Let's take this space component, let's duplicate it. That'll add it to the end of the list. And then let's duplicate the shape component as well. And now I get two arrows in there. Maybe the shape should be a little less between those two. And maybe the space afterwards should be, or actually we need a space right after that shape component. I'll click the space button here. We'll add one more space. It's a little big. Let's go to 0.05. And you can see how quickly we can create line types. Hit OK. Hit save to this. And it's down there. If I come back to Notepad Editor, let's reload that. We can see down here, it creates that sanitary sewer line type. Okay, Linetype Manager interfaces not just with the lin file, but the drawings as well. So I could take this sewer line type, I could add it to the drawing right away. Hit OK to this. Let's close out of Linetype Manager. And now if I grab an object here, or a layer, if we obviously we would more likely assign it in the layer, but you can see that this line type is now in the drawing. So we can easily import line types from the drawing in this way. We can also do the reverse. What if I have some line types in my drawing assigned to some objects or some layers, but they're not in my lin file? This is often something that can happen when standards are kind of developed and they evolve over years. You lose track of them. Okay, Linetype Manager will actually read line type definitions in the DWG and parse out the lin code or the lin programming that should belong, so we can get them into the lin file. So we can run the import command. I can grab a couple objects here. It finds a fiber and a fuel line type. It picks up that there are some rotation components in it. I need to assign the rotation type. And then it's going to take Linetype Manager and import that fiber and that fuel line. Of course, if I hit save, it's going to write it to that lin file right back here. Now they'll show up down here. Now you can take these, you can organize them any way you want in your lin file. There's a couple line type order options up here. Display only. And when I do this, I can sort by these columns. Or if I set it to actual, this is the actual order that it appears in the lin file. Now, to me, it doesn't matter that much anymore, but we do give you control on this if you want to change the order. So I can push this fiber one up and change it, save it here. Coming back here, we'll reload this. Now the fiber one is up here. Okay. There's filtering options. As you type out the letters, it'll filter that list. Many of you have huge lists of different line types. So managing your line types a lot easier in this way. But for a lot of folks, they sometimes create line types on a per project basis. They put project data embedded right in a line type, or maybe this is something you've wanted to do and you just haven't been able to because it's just so time consuming to work in this interface. It becomes very easy in Linetype Manager. And this is a free tool, so and then anyone who wants to use it at your organization certainly can. That isn't licensing required for it. So that's Linetype Manager. Let's talk about what to me is probably one of the most painful, frustrating parts of managing content and standards inside your template. We talked about layers and styles and all these different things in your template that goes into your standards. And the thing with these is that they're not independent items, right? Like your layers, those aren't, like if I don't have any objects in the drawing, those layers can be used in different places, most commonly in Civil 3D styles. And there's no way for me to know where those are being used if I were to try to, say, delete a layer or I'm trying to clean some things up in my template. And so what do? You end up searching through your settings tab and is it in this style? Is it in that style? Let's think about another core component of your templates. Text styles, right? Text styles are the same kind of thing. If they're in use, which they very likely are across all sorts of Civil 3D styles, and even in objects in a drawing, if it's not an empty template. And these are the same thing. You don't know where they're being used if you're trying to clean them up or delete them out. Okay. One of the most frustrating parts to me of maintaining templates, building new templates, overhauling them, whatever it is. Now you guys are in roles, you probably get emails or comments from your teams and they're like, Brian, can you just clean up? There's way too many layers. No one uses these in our division, right? Can we get rid of those? And you're like, oh God, I don't even know where they're being used. And maybe you run this command lay del, it's a layer delete command, and what it does is it'll force delete layers. But if there was references to those layers, you don't know where those were, and you can't change those references in any way. So what we can do with this second tool here is we can easily track down those references. We talked about layers first. Here's a layer. It shows me all of my references. Turns out it's a whole host of Civil 3D styles. Now I can take any one of those styles. I can jump into here. I can edit these components of the style one at a time. Or if I know that I just have entirely too many layers there and I want to simplify it and have all these things point to a single common layer, I can easily do that as well. So I'm going to change this from CAD Pat to CAD. And all those references are gone. And of course, now I can delete that layer out of there. It's the same thing with these textiles. How many templates you guys have with textiles that have just been there for years and you don't even know if someone uses them, or maybe you know they don't use them and you just haven't been able to get rid of them, okay? Template Tracker tracks quite literally thousands and thousands of references. I'd say we have about 99.9% of them nailed down in terms of where these things can be used, layers, textiles, and so forth. And they're all wrapped into this tool. So anything that you can't find a reference to of these base components, textiles, layers, dim styles, and multi-leader styles, we can track it in here. So here's textiles. This one is being referenced in some block definitions. Now, if it was a template, you wouldn't actually have any visual like this, but I have a few of these blocks inserted just to kind of aid in the demonstration here. But what would it take to get rid of that textile in just 7 block definitions? You'd have to first know what blocks they're in. You'd have to go in the block editor. You have to change this textile, save out, and do it for each and every block if you knew which block they were in, right? And so that's what we're trying to do here is save a ton of time. I can change this to the standard textile, hit OK. Now those references are gone. If I come out to my drawing, I'll do a regen, and you'll see these blocks now. Flip to a different style, and now I can delete that textile. Template Tracker will track all sorts of references. If I pick on the annotative one, there is default dim style and textile. There's entities in the drawings that are referencing this. And then of course, as always, there's tons and tons of Civil 3D styles. There's hundreds of references to the annotatives textile here. I can grab all of these, switch them all to standard. You might have seen some of the updates in the drawing here. And I can delete out annotated, okay? So efficient content, efficient templates are a big part of your guys' responsibility. And I know it is because I've worked on that stuff for years. And you get to a place where you're just like, screw it, this is good enough. And you just give them the template, right? Because you can't take the time to clean this up or create that. Or that's what we're trying to solve with some of this stuff here. Let's talk about layers. It's all about layers, right? We've got our layer manager with our whole list of layers here. We have a second interface, which are the object layers in drawing settings. So these dictate where Civil 3D objects, when created, what layer will they land on, okay? And just when you get your set of layers all dialed in and all ready to go, you have to make a new template with a different set of layers, or you need to overhaul some layers. Or maybe some of you guys just haven't fully got your templates cleaned up in the first place over the years, and you still just have some of that work to do to clean things up. This interface is probably one of the better ones in Civil 3D, but it still leaves a lot to be desired. Working with description fields in here is incredibly painful, right? Adding new layers, creating new layer names. What if I just wanted to like swap out the word road and all these layer names for an entirely different name, okay? We can't do those kind of mass edits in any way. Or what if I know I don't do any rail work in this template and I just want to delete these, right? it becomes really clumsy in this way. And this interface here, the object layer setting interface, it's intuitive. It makes sense what you have to do here, but you can't even do mass editing here. It's all one at a time. And oftentimes there's a strategy where you want to create a layer reference here, but you don't want the layer made unless that object is created. That's a nice strategy, in fact. If you guys ever want, maybe seldom created objects, this is the list of all the Civil 3D objects here. If you don't want that layer to exist initially in the template, you can set the layer here and then go force delete it. And like if Ciano isn't in here, at the time of creation, it'll create that layer for you and put that object on that layer. And it'll account for any kind of suffix or prefix modifiers you want to use as well. But it's very clumsy to do. They have to go create the layer, come here and set it, then go force delete it. Okay. So both of these interfaces, to me, leave a lot to be desired. And that's what we're trying to address. And that's what I want to address with this other tool set here called Layer Boss. What in effect we can do is take both of those interfaces, we can push them out to Excel. We can do any kind of work we want there. And then we can push all those changes or that whole new layer list right back into Civil 3D. So let me show you what it looks like. Let's start with the object layers. Those are a bit simpler. We're going to export our entire object layer list. We'll save that out to Excel. Okay. Some of you have probably come up with some clever ways to kind of make a clipboard copy and put that into Excel. So the export isn't necessarily the big feat that we're accomplishing here. Although the export we do give you is a nicely formatted one. It has data validation in columns where it makes sense. You'll see that in the other tool with the layer manager as well. So now changes are quite easy in here. It becomes easy to simply type a new alignment name in here. Or maybe you're like I was saying, we don't want road in all of these. Let's get rid of road. Replace that with nothing. And then maybe a few other areas need to drop in. We can copy and paste this stuff around. We can press and drag, right? This is a beauty of Excel. We're all pretty comfortable here. Okay. If you want wildcards, you want to use wildcards. This is where it takes the object name that's created and puts it as either a prefix or a suffix to that layer name if you put the asterisk in this column. Now, if you want to have a dash between there, you can do that as well. You can also put other things in here. So you could have other words in here, right? You can build out this value field any way you want. I like to employ it with pipes and structures and pipe networks, where I take the pipe network name and it creates new unique layers in that way. And in this way, you can build out more complex formulas in the value field to, if you want to perhaps insert the name of the objects in the middle of the layer name and not just as a prefix or a suffix. A nice strategy there. All right, let's save this. Let me show you how it works coming back. Okay, so some of this is not just about, well, it's easier to work in Excel. It's also about ease of transferring data. In fact, with object layers specifically, there's no way to transfer those settings from one drawing to the next. When you import styles and settings from another template, it doesn't bring this stuff along. So I'll show you that use case too. So I'll come back here, we'll click on Create, Edit Object Layers. I'm going to browse out to that Excel sheet. I'm also going to turn on the Create New Layers button here, which If there are layer names defined in here, which there are, because I swapped out the word road in all of these, it's going to create new layers for me. Go ahead, next. Gives me a nice little preview or a report on what's about to happen to my drawing. So this hasn't happened yet. So in blue, it's telling me it's going to create a new layer automatically. For green, these are all the updates. And then what if I made a typo, right? Like we go to Excel because it's got all this flexibility, but it's also in some ways too flexible. So I could put like invalid characters for layer names in here. I could bump the object name column and actually make a typo in there. Like what's going to happen if I do that? Let's save this. By the way, you can work with this open, Excel open, and at the same time come back to Civil 3D, reload this right down here, and now it's going to respond to those changes. So it won't update this stuff if it finds, if in fact the first error it finds, it'll flag it for you. So you can come back right here, make sure, oh yeah, I did fat finger that. That shouldn't have been there. Reload that. Of course, it flags and finds that error in the layer name. Okay, so it's very foolproof as well. You know, and normally in the object layers or in the layer manager, it wouldn't let you create layers with those characters in them. So we handle that right within this tool as well. Let's hit OK to this. Okay, right off the bat, it created a whole bunch of new layers that weren't in here already because we swapped out C or the road text for a bunch of other ones. And I'm going to show you how you handle those other layers that still exist with road in there. But take a look at this. All these settings pushed into these object layers, okay? So it's set all those layers without road in them. It's set all those wildcard settings, the suffixes, and so on. And then because I checked on create new layer, like remember that C align layer? I just typed that right in Excel. If I checked the option on when I import it, it'll create those layers for me automatically. Okay, so that's the object layers piece. Let's do this again, or excuse me, let's do this with the layer manager. So that workflow that you saw, this is what we can do with a lot, in fact, all of the major table type interfaces in Civil 3D. So let's export our DWG layers. And on this export option, we get a few other prompts here. We can pull from the current drawing or other drawings. Okay, so we could aggregate together a list of layers from multiple drawings at once. Perhaps we're overhauling and creating a whole new layer list. We can limit the export by filters. And as I do this, you can see the list change down here. I can even type in a text filter that would just give me 8 layers. Okay. Another common strategy that I've employed a lot of times is, you know, say you have a set of layers, like some demo layers that you don't want in your template to start with, okay? You might want to grab those. Okay, this would be a really easy way to go and export those sets of layers into Excel and then import them into an empty template so you have a drawing with just those layers. And then there's 2 ways to handle that. You could be using Layer Boss to import layers that we'll do in a second to add a whole new set of layers into a template. Or without Layer Boss, if you simply export these 8 layers or 20 demo layers, whatever you might have, and then import those into an empty template. And you can do that through Design Center as well. There's a variety of strategies for doing that. But once you have that separate drawing, you can use a, I believe it's a _.insert command. You can put it right in your tool palettes, and it'll insert everything in a source drawing, like a bunch of layers, for example. So it's a nice strategy to have those supplemental layers available just on the tool palettes and to have those come in very easily. The Layer Boss will help you easily pick out or parse out those layers if you need. All right, let's go ahead and export this. A few other things to mention though. Line types, right? If we're going to Excel and I'm supposed to work with my layers there, well, there's a variety of considerations here. It's not just a bunch of text. There's line types to choose from. Layer Boss will actually take all the line types in your drawing, as well as any line types that you specify in your list here. And these are just found based on your options support paths. So read all the line types from those lin files as well, and you'll see how they show up in a list in Excel in a moment. We can have it add background colors to the cells, and then if I use STB files, it'll populate all the available plot styles as well. So I'm going to click Export. We're going to export this out to Excel, and we're going to tell it to open right away. And again, you could do a clipboard copy, but you end up with really just kind of a messy list of layers, and you don't get what I like to call a smart export. A smart export is it builds in all this data validation. So Layer Boss is doing all this for you. These are yes/no columns or off/on columns. Those line types, remember we said we can export all the line types from our lin files. It pulls all of those from the drawing as well as the lin file and puts them in a drop-down list right here, so you can easily choose this down. And it becomes obviously very easy to assign. Your line weights, okay, your plot styles, those all export as well if you're using STBs. So now that we're in Excel, obviously the editing, everything becomes quite easy. So a little CNO table, let's do that again, and this way we'll delete those out. Don't do any hydrology work in this template. We'll pull those layers out. Think about just descriptions. Descriptions are helpful to guide users on what those layers are used for. And it's a very clumsy, tedious interface to build that out. In Excel, obviously, it becomes quite easy. Creating some new layers. You can just be copying cells. Okay. Right. What if you're building a whole new layer set? Okay, I just started with the export here. Okay, but we could create new tabs in here where we're kind of using some formulas to build out a formulaic approach to all of our layers. Okay, right? We often, maybe you don't use NCS, but often there's some kind of organization you employ to help things sort properly, to respond to layer filters properly. And so rather than just typing out a list like this, you can, in fact, use some other tabs here. The first tab is what will sync back to Civil 3D. But here in Excel, it's very flexible. So I've got a nice webcast that shows a new template workflow. Check out the CTC YouTube page, and it shows the process of going and building a new template. And I show some of those strategies in there as well. So let's save this template here, or this Excel file. Come back to here, we run the create edit DWG layers. And it's as simple as this, you just point to that Excel file. And what we're going to do now is sync to drawing layers, but we could do the add drawing layers. The difference here, sync is an additive or subtractive action, meaning if it was deleted in Excel, it's going to delete from Civil 3D. Whereas add will just simply add the layers that exist in Excel but don't exist in here. It won't delete anything in your template. Hit next. And similar to the object layer option, it's going to give you a full report on everything that's about to happen. So here's my new layers. There's some updated layers where it's telling me colors and line types that have changed. It lists all my unchanged layers. And then I'd expect to see some deleted layers here, but what's the deal with most Civil 3D templates, right? We have those layers referenced in a variety of places, not all of them, but certainly some of them. And so then those will get caught in one of two different options here. One is the cannot delete because there are references, and then one is deleted layers, but they're referenced in description keys. Okay, now if they come up there, you can have the option to not delete it, but they will delete if you leave that option. So when they get caught in this filter, by default, it's set to ignore. But we can uncheck that, and if we don't know where that layer is being used, you click the little 3 dots, the ellipsis button here, and it'll launch Template Tracker right with inside here. And like I'd shown you earlier, we can very easily swap all those out. And then when I go back to Layer Boss, of course, it tells me this is now slated for deletion. So if I know, okay, yeah, these layers, those should all get the layer CNO table. And then these, I know I just want to get rid of, and we want to swap that out for layer 0. Okay. Now you can leave ignore checked on, meaning it won't attempt to delete layers that have references in there. Or you can do as I did and change those references on the fly. CNO site, there's some of those new layers, new colors. All those hydrology layers are gone. Okay. So use a combination of this stuff in your processes for building, overhauling, changing your templates. Right? Maybe some of you guys have something coming up that your templates haven't been touched in a long time and you've got a bunch of work to do. Like I said, check out that webcast of mine on creating a new template. What does that look like? I give a lot of tips and tricks along the way and show you where this tool set will fit in to make it a lot easier, a lot faster for you. Okay, let's talk about one other tool set in the CIM Manager Suite, and then I want to highlight a few of those free custom subassemblies, show you how those look a little bit, and then I want to talk on content deployment and give you some resources and tips and tricks on that. So Survey Template Manager is this tool set, and it deals with basically the two other major table interfaces in Civil 3D. One is your description key set. Okay, this dictates when points are created from import in Civil 3D based on their description, what layer, what style, all these different settings that get assigned to them. And this is a terribly painful interface to work in. You click the new button and it flashes and glitches and it drops it to the bottom of the list. Okay. A very clumsy interface to work in. So let's do it in Excel. Let's export this out. And again, what I call a smart export, meaning I get my point styles that all exist in the drawing. They'll show up here. The styles themselves obviously aren't here, but the text, the reference to them is here so that you can select them. And when you import back in, it'll change all those assignments. Okay. So we're trying to achieve two things here: give you the most flexible table interface and universal interface, Excel. Yet all the kind of Civil 3D specific features like choosing which styles and which layers should be assigned to a given code. We can do all that here. So obviously deleting of things becomes quite easy. What if I want to make a new code? Okay, I can do it right in here. Just type these out, and then you assign your styles and your layers and so forth as you see fit. We did bake in one other feature here, which is that if the style doesn't exist, you can have it create it for you. Okay, so by default, it's going to want you to select from here, but we can instead type what a new point style should be. And when I do that, it tells me this doesn't match the data validation restrictions for that cell. Okay, that automatically happens with that survey template tracker or the tool. It does all this data validation. Now you can override it. If you just simply hit OK, it's going to allow that text to come through. But here's what we do. We export all the block names from the drawing as well. so that you can have access to them right within Excel. And what this will do is create a point style for you with that block inserted. Now I know a number of other settings in your point styles to control how that looks. This is giving you basically a starting point, doing most of that work for you, creating the styles. And the other settings come from the default settings that exist in your template. You can choose our label style, of course, and then what layer it should land on. And maybe some of these layers here, you're looking at them and everyone's like, well, I don't want it to be node and symbol, just put everything on a point layer. Okay. So this is, again, some of the kind of stuff that becomes really powerful. I can change out SYMB for that. And then let's do the same for node. Okay, so let's save this. We'll come back to Civil 3D. We'll run the create edit description keys command. I simply browse out to that Excel file. Now I can do one of two things here. I can create an entirely new description key set, or I can update one that's already in the drawing. And then there's, again, a couple options here. Syncing would be, with Excel being the master copy, add or delete keys, description keys, based on the Excel option. I can tell it to create new point styles here if I want, point and label styles. If I type that out in the Excel file, hit next here, and again gives me a report. Now it's going to flag this stuff as red because the stuff doesn't exist in the drawing. Okay. So it behaves a little bit differently than a layer boss, just based on how people might want to use description keys. Now, it's going to allow us to do this. It's going to allow us to have this point prefix in there. But you can handle it in two different ways. You can, like the object layers, you can have a layer setting or a layer spelled out in the description keys, and only at the time of that point being created will that layer be created. Now the drawback is that it's always just a white and continuous layer. Okay, but that's one strategy. So this won't automatically create all these layers. If you want to, you go right back to Layer Boss and switch out all those layer names, and so that it matches your description key here. Okay, but you can have these layer references in here without the layer actually existing in your drawing if you want. So here's unchanged codes, deleted codes. Hit OK to this. There we are. Okay. If I open up my key set, all those changes, including new codes, show up in here. Okay. And all these settings will all exist in Excel when we export. Okay. I'm not going to walk through it in detail, but the final thing, and this is probably one of the most painful places to work, is this figure prefix database. You're creating new things, you're deleting items, it's flashing, it's glitching, it's very slow to work, and frankly, you guys don't have time to mess around with that. Okay, push it out to Excel, bring it back, create new ones, update your existing one, whatever it is you need to do. Okay. So a lot of different things there. Where they fit in, it depends on what you guys are doing, right? Do you have a new template creation in front of you? Do you have just a lot of updates or cleanup to do? Maybe you've got 2 big templates and you need to split those into 3 or 4 smaller templates. A lot of different strategies around that. And the CIM Manager Suite tools fit in most all of those places. Let me touch on the free subassemblies I talked about. These are free subassemblies made from Subassembly Composer. And you can just go download them from the CTC Software website. We made these a number of years ago. and they are now available to you for free. So let me just give you a quick little preview of what some of these look like. A lot of you guys who are familiar with corridors and subassemblies, you know that the options are quite limited in terms of how you control the slopes. Even just the names of the parameters are really goofy. You have that A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So these are all named intuitively. And then more importantly, when it comes to our cross sections and quantity takeoff, it really starts coming down to the point, link, and shape codes. And so all of that coding is exposed in these subassemblies. And you can change it right in properties here to get things to label differently or to quantify things differently. Okay, let me give you, show you a couple other ones here. There's a sidewalk boulevard one here. Okay, all of this is dynamic so that if you want that extension in there or not, you can control that. A variety of other ones. So go and check those out. Like I said, they're free. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about content deployment. Okay, the focus was on content creation primarily. That's what we said up front. But content deployment is a big piece of this, right? It's one thing to create all this content, but how do I effectively get that stuff out to everyone? Okay, there's a lot going on with that. Let's talk about some of these goals. You want it to be intuitive for users, right? What you deploy to them needs to be easy to work in, meaning like things need to be organized properly and so forth. In some cases, you need to be able to support multiple standards. For your cases, you want it to be easy to deploy and to update, right? If you make changes to those templates, to tool palettes, you name it, okay? You need to be able to support remote users, especially these days. And you want to be able to quickly migrate to new versions as you move to a new version of Civil 3D. Now there's about 1,000 considerations here. I'm going to give you some general tips and tricks here, and then I'm going to point you guys to another class I've done on this. Intuitive for users. How do you make it intuitive, right? When it comes to things beyond like your templates, and it comes to with all your libraries and so forth, be it subassemblies or blocks, okay, tool palettes really are the best place to do this. Detailed tool palettes. It needs to be on demand. It needs to be accessible to the users right within Civil 3D, right? And we don't want them to have to like browse through different folders, that kind of stuff. We want it organized in a detailed way. Supporting multiple standards, it comes to right to the top of the chain, which is the AutoCAD profile that controls tons of different settings as far as where AutoCAD and Civil 3D look to find different content. To make this stuff easy to deploy and to update, it's about using a variety of scripts to sync these updates to users. Because some of this stuff, while you can throw it all on a server, some of it needs to be local on users' machines to control how it behaves for them. And how do you support remote users, right? A variety of you are probably going through this challenge, and that's why I really want to underscore this. An all-local setup can solve things like this in many, many different ways. It helps with better performance, okay? And then all those on-demand tool palettes, templates, and so forth, they're all local, okay? And you manage that all through a set of syncing scripts that makes it behave as though there's a single master copy that everyone's pointing to, but in fact, they're not. And what about quick migration to new versions, okay? You have to get standardized in your organization. So with this, I'm going to talk through a few of these things, but the more important thing I want to do is point you guys to free resources I already have on this. And I've set this up with a lot of firms. A lot of organizations have followed my classes on AU and on MU's website on how to configure this stuff. It doesn't mean everything I point out in here is for you. but I would bet that for most of you, there's something in here that would be helpful. And so let me just take a peek or show you right on the website here. This is going to bring me right to the class and just show you what's available on here. So this is the class. I've taught a lot of different classes at AU and MU over the years, but this is kind of the latest one on configuring and deploying Civil 3D. There's, of course, a detailed recording on here, the video. You can watch that class here. But let me talk through the handout a little bit here. I just start out with some conceptual stuff here. I talk about organizing your content. This makes a big difference when you're migrating from one version to the next. Okay, and a lot of the stuff you want to be versionless in terms of the folders, but how do you tackle that? Okay, a lot of that is in this handout right here. Again, you can download this for free. All of these different content file types, there's a really detailed table that explains what they are, what their purpose is, and how you reference them or path to them in that configurations. It's not always just in options, it's spread all over the place. Okay, and so a lot of you guys know a number of these pieces, but there's some nuanced things here that you certainly might pick up on if you guys have been doing this for a lot of years, or if you're kind of new to it, I think you'll find a lot of helpful things in here. Now, one of the questions that came in was about how to get custom tool palettes to users. That's one of the biggest things, and I was talking about it earlier, that you have to take advantage of tool palettes in terms of organizing your content. It is currently the best interface to use in Civil 3D because it's highly customizable, right? But how you deploy that, okay? I recommend it all goes local. Everything else in your setup is local as well. Now, it doesn't have to be, but some of the strategies I talk about in here allow you to do that. A couple of tips along the way with that. I show in this class utilizing Design Center to quickly build out tool palettes, tool palette metadata itself, right? So if we take a look at those tool palettes again, there's a set of metadata that controls what those buttons look like, how they behave. Okay, all that stuff saves to ATC files, and those are text-based files. In this class, I also show how you can do mass edits across those text files to do things like making references to DWGs pathless, making migrating an entire tool palette set to go from, say, 2020 to 2021. You know, if you have paths in those ATCs, you can quickly change that across 100 ATC files at once, and you don't even have to rebuild your tool palettes. And one thing I'm a big advocate of is a local setup. Now, how this works exactly for you might vary a little bit. But you use a series of scripts to build out. There's a variety of ways to do it, but you're basically using some kind of a master computer that syncs content to a server and then content from a server to user computers. And you automate this by Windows login and a variety of things like that. I talk about this in detail right here, so I highly encourage you to look at this. And what I have here is a hypothetical setup. What's going to work exactly for you guys certainly will vary. Now, there's more complex setups you can employ as well, but take a look at this, right? You might have a pretty effective setup going right now. I always thought like, oh, I figured out tool palettes. And then I meet someone and they have some other tip on it, right? So there's always something new to learn for certainly myself and all of us who deal with these CAD management paths. I provide the actual text for the scripts right in here, how those work. Okay. So a few conclusions, and then we'll go to a QTO, or excuse me, a Q&A session if anyone has any follow-up questions. My first point here is around content creation. That template work doesn't have to be as difficult as it is right now. And I'd encourage you to contact ATG USA. They're the ones that host Midwest University. Talk to them about the CIM Manager Suite. You can download free trials of it at ctcsoftware.com. Try it out. If you don't like it, right, move on with your standard procedures, right? If you see something there that will change your processes for the better, contact ATG. Those of you who do a lot of transportation work, okay, corridor modeling, it's all about the source subassemblies you're using. And effective subassemblies make a big difference. Go and download that corridor productivity pack. Like I said, it's free. You can take and open those PKT files right in Subassembly Composer, tweak them, adjust them to your liking, make them your own, okay? And deploy Civil 3D more effectively, okay? When you move to a new version where a new office is opened, right? This doesn't have to be painful. It can be quite efficient. Now, it doesn't mean it's, I guess, simple to understand. There's a lot of details in there, right? But if you set it up right, it can be really effective. So the class I was referring to, Civil 3D on Steroids, I've taught at a variety of other conferences, but the latest one is at Autodesk University from last year. Lots and lots of good resources in there. To be honest, guys, I probably get emails once a week on this class, like talking with different people, how they're deploying things. Like I said, it's always different from one organization to the next. But I've tried to compile what I've learned over the years into this class in terms of deploying and setting up Civil 3D. So with that, thanks again for your time. Have a good day, everyone. Take care.